Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Today is Black Women's Equal Pay Day. It is the symbolic day Black women must work into the year to earn what white men did by December 31st of last year. Just to put a fine point on it, if he made $100,000 by December 31st, it would take her all of last year and up to today to make that same $100,000. You get me? So despite higher education and full-time employment, Black women still earn only about 66 cents for every dollar a white man makes. That amounts to more than $1 million in lost earnings. And it's not just a number. It means missed opportunities and lucrative futures delayed. Well, tonight we speak with Black women about this reality, and we ask, why does the gap persist? Also, what will it take to close it? My guests are Dr. Venetia Dutra, Associate Professor of Finance in the Howard University School of Business, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, political analyst and founder of Max Black Media, and Jasmine Bowles, President of the Georgia chapter of 925. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this really important conversation. I want to start with some fast facts about Black women and finance and employment. They are the most employed group in the U.S., but the latest stats show a concerning rise in unemployment rates in recent months. Why is that? Black women are among the most educated demographic in the United States. They are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs, owning nearly 3 million businesses nationwide. And despite their educational achievements and workforce participation, they are disproportionately affected by poverty. Obviously, this is not a date to celebrate, so you can't necessarily say happy equal pay day. But, Avis, how do you view Black Women Equal Pay Day, knowing that the date is a day later? So they're working one day longer to make that same amount of money.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. It's not a celebration. It's a commemoration. It is a specific day in which we're reminded about how much longer and harder we have to work in order to get where sometimes the person who works right beside us every day got to by the end of the previous year. And actually, when you go even deeper with those statistics, I argue that Black women suffer a double wage gap, because those statistics are typically used in comparison, as you mentioned, to white male wages. But you know what? We also suffer a wage gap as compared to our white women counterparts as well. So the reality is, despite our education, despite our commitment to the workforce, despite our ambition and excellence, because all surveys on this matter show that Black women are especially likely to want that next promotion. She's especially likely to want to exceed at work. She's not oftentimes surrounded with the same level of mentors and sponsorships that others have to help her get there. We still, year after year after year, find ourselves in this way where we are overworked, underpaid, and it's gotten to be, and it is, just an institutionalized reality of racism and sexism, the intersection of which defines our reality in America. And there's probably no more salient way in which it lives out each and every day than the degree to which we are exploited at work year in and year out. And here we are again commemorating another Black women, I would say, unequal pay day.
Venetia, how does it feel as a Black woman when you either know or suspect during the course of your career that you are being paid less for the same amount of work as your white counterpart?
Harold, doesn't feel great. I think I can speak for all the sisters on this call. We've all been there, depending on where we are in our professional walk. Doesn't feel good. And ultimately, as our sister Avis mentioned, Black women are consistently the most educated. We work overtime, double time. We're often the caregivers at home. And so there's a lot of weight and pressure on us, both personally and professionally. And so it's a slap in the face because when you think about who generally steps up in the workplace to take an additional role, to stay later, it is a female. And oftentimes it is a woman of color, it is a Black female. So it's insulting. It's insulting because we do the same work, if not more, often more, for significantly less pay.
Mm-hmm. You know, Jasmine, I've been talking about this issue on this program for many, many years. And, you know, as a journalist, have been talking about this issue for decades. So why isn't it getting better?
You know, it's such a loaded question with so many answers. And one of the things I think, you know, that this day brings to our attention, not only are the dates lined up to represent that Black women are going to take much longer in the year to earn equal wages, but I think this also manifests in all of the challenges that continue to show up in the lives of Black women and families. And so what I mean by that is, if we know that Black women are also overworked and underpaid, how do you think this shows up at the end of the month when there is more month than money, but the bills are still coming, yet the cost of housing is increasing? We know the cost of childcare in many cases costs as much as a mortgage or a rent. We know that we have both rural and urban healthcare centers closing down. And I'm in a state that is number one in America for Black maternal morbidity.
Oh, wow.
You're
And
in
all of
Georgia.
these,
Wow.
I'm in Georgia. And all of these things are interconnected. And so I really appreciate the sisters raising out the intersectionality of the identity in race and gender, but all the issues are also intertwined. And we work really hard at 9 to 5 to represent that. And I think that's what's happening over the past few years. To answer your question about trends in time, we've seen a confluence of these issues.
Avis, what do you believe is behind this issue? Why is it still happening?
You know, there are a lot of factors at play here. Included, obviously, is the reality of just plain discrimination, right? Where people are not offered the same level of compensation for similar work. I mean, that's just a reality that we cannot ignore. There are some also realities that are baked in with regards to the type of opportunities that are opened up to us, where other opportunities may not be as easily accessible, that have differentials in pay related to those different opportunities. But also, I would say that generally speaking, we sort of live in a space of secrecy when it comes to compensation in this nation. And until we get to a place where we know, okay, when we can, trust but verify, right, that the person who is doing the very same job as we are doing is being paid comparably to us, we will forever be at a disadvantage, because typically these sorts of atrocities are never unveiled until something mistakenly happens, where someone finally sees that someone whom is a coworker of them, someone for whom they might even be doing more work than that person, but they somehow end up finding out how much that person makes, only to determine years later that they have been discriminated against for years. And so until there's something like a Paycheck Fairness Act that specifically allows people to know how people are compensated in their institution, it allows discrimination to continue to be inbred and live within our compensation in America, because it's all hidden under this very, very thick veil of secrecy.
Venetia, is there some unintentional bias sometimes when the people who hold the purse strings, the hiring managers, when they have a Black woman that they are going to hire, and they have a white guy that they're going to hire, and they hire them both, they're equally qualified, but because whether he's a white man or because he may be a white man with a family, she is, a black woman. She may have a husband and a family, or she may be single. But when you look at it through the lenses of unintentional bias, is that one of the things that gets in the way of equal pay?
There's so much in this conversation. Let me answer your question directly. There is conscious and unconscious bias in this. You have just look at the administration we're in right now. Clearly, there's conscious bias. There are many men. If you ask them, actually, there have been some congressional hearings where we've had congressional members testify that they don't believe a woman should earn the same as a man, and their rebuttal is, well, why should they? I'm a man, you're a woman. So we have conscious bias that is very clear. And then we have unconscious bias where those that hold the purse strings don't realize, but they don't realize they're doing it. They're not consciously trying to undermine the wealth of a Black woman. But in essence, when there's a pay scale, and so Avis is talking about pay transparency, there has been a push for that. But even in that, there's a scale. They may say the pay is going to be between 130 and 150. Mm-hmm. Time after time, there's significant research on this. Women are lowballed and are started at the low end, the very lowest end of that scale, whereas when you're dealing with a man, they'll start at the top. Now, why does that unconscious bias exist? I think it relates to the systemic and historical racism and oppression that exists in this country, and I'd say albeit throughout the world. So there's conscious and unconscious. And I want to speak to something Avis said. I think pay transparency is one piece of the puzzle. The more we become comfortable sharing our income and our bonus, it is this area that we don't like to talk about, but we must, particularly as women. But there's also what we call occupational segregation. And that ultimately means that I can be discriminated against in one of two ways. One, women tend to choose lower paying occupations and go into lower paying sectors. That's education, healthcare, administrative roles, more so than men. Okay. So that means we're starting at a lower income. And then we have what we call this vertical segregation where, okay, say we do have, Avis and I, or Harold, you and I do have the same title. I'm generally not promoted or put up for promotion in the same way or at the same cadence that a man would be. And so my income is compressed in both of those ways. I am in a low income. I am encouraged to move into lower income sectors. And there's research on that as well, that women are encouraged to move into, you want to be a doctor? How about a nurse? Oh, honey, why don't you become a teacher? There are
no shade to the nurses.
None
right.
at all.
Right.
But if I'm a young woman, think about that. If I'm a young woman that looks up to my teacher or my professor, and I say I have an aspiration, and time again, my voice is nullified, and I'm told to be something, again, not necessarily lesser as if the job is less, but I'm not supported in that. That there's a compounding effect there. And so those two things significantly impact our wealth and our ultimate well-being.
Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense. We are going to do a deep dive, because you did make an excellent point, Venetia, about talking about our salaries as a way of addressing the strategy of dealing with this. So how much money do you make? Hold that point. I am going to gotcha.
The sisters and I will talk afterwards.
Oh, so y'all are just gonna throw me under the bus. Hold on. We are going to take a break, but don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about Black Women's Equal Pay Day. My guests are Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, political analyst and founder of Max Black Media, Jasmine Bowles, president of the Georgia chapter of 9 to 5, and Dr. Venetia Dutra, associate professor of finance in the Howard University School of Business. Before I get into your business, Venetia, I did want to get the Cliff Notes from Jasmine on what is 9 to 5.
Yeah, thank you for asking. 9 to 5 is a national, nonpartisan nonprofit, and we are ultimately dedicated to achieving economic justice and improving working conditions for working women. And so what that means is ultimately we work to make sure that working women are well working women. And in order for a working woman to be well, there need to be certain systems in place. Those structures and systems, some of them happen at the organizational level at her workplace, but some of them live in policies. And that includes things like paid leave. That includes things like making sure that the family has parental leave, not just maternal, but paternal as well. That also makes sure that childcare is affordable and accessible, that housing is plentiful. And that also means that our economic justice work really makes sure that these well-working women have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink as we continue this work.
Okay, thank you for that. So back to getting into Venetia's business. All jokes aside, do you have those conversations with your sister friends, your ride or dies, about how much money you make? Venetia, I'll ask you first.
Yes, sure, absolutely. I just had a conversation with a colleague probably about 3 days ago. And I will tell you that it is not common. No, it is just not common. Even when we had the conversation, I could tell there was hesitation around, we sort of danced around it a little bit. So there's full transparency here. And then we eventually got there. And I think we both, but it is just not something we're comfortable doing. And we must move beyond that because ultimately this secrecy allows a lot of this to persist. And then we need to bring the men to the table because if we are not moving in a united front, it becomes much more difficult it becomes easier to dismiss me if I come alone. And Avis and Jasmine just suffer in silence. But if three of us have lunch once a week and we say, hey, sis, what's going on with you? Hey, I got it. The bonus time is, did anybody mention a bonus to you? Nobody mentioned. I was told there's a bonus. You better go talk. So now there's a united front. And we must move toward a level of comfort in discussing these types of issues and how we can support each other.
So Avis, as someone who during the course of your career has worked for someone or an organization or a business, and now you are a business owner, have you always revealed to your sister friends how much you were making? Have you always been comfortable? I mean, do you do it now? What's your story in reference to that?
So I have not always done that, sort of revealed to people, particularly throughout my career, what I was making at various different levels, though I was very aggressive around encouraging women around salary negotiation. And I did a lot of training on that because there's also some research on that too. Particularly, it seems to suggest that oftentimes disproportionately women are more likely to accept the first salary that they are offered rather than going through a counter negotiation sort of strategy. And what happens is when you, especially coming right and starting your career, when you accept a lower amount, that amount tends to be the basis from which you will receive compensation for many years to come, because the raises
Right.
are typically a percentage of what your current salary is. So you'll never get caught up, right? If you start off so far behind because you failed to aggressively negotiate. So I've done a lot on that. But as it relates to my entrepreneurship, I have been more transparent about that, specifically related to encouraging women to charge more. And that's around the fact that, once again, knowing the data on the degree to which Black women face this double wage gap, what's been particularly frustrating to me as an entrepreneur is looking at the data of Black business owners as well, Black women business owners. Our revenue tends to even, fall far behind those of other women counterparts. Typically for many years, the typical Black woman-owned business over the course of the year only made about like $25,000, is absolutely ridiculous, as compared to like over $200,000 for the typical white woman-owned business. And so it is part of this issue, once again, of when we're in the workplace, oftentimes not countering to get more. And then when we have the power to write our own checks, somehow believing that we're worth less and not charging more. And so a lot of what I've done has really been around helping women to be able to see the value in what they do and to charge appropriately.
Well, I will say, to your point, and this is not about Black women so much as it is about Black folks in general, particularly considering the obstacles, the historic obstacles related to employment for us, where you have even educated parents who will say, they offer you this much, you better go ahead and take that job. And Avis, that's what they tell you. When they've offered me, this, and I haven't told them, you better take that job before they hire somebody else, because you need a job, because you owe me $20. So.
Can I add to that, Harold?
Am I lying?
No. I think you're spot on, and Avis is going here. There is a cultural element to this whole thing. I think one of the major issues, and I talk to parents a lot about this when I do financial literacy programming, one of the major elements is we don't give our children a voice. I think most of our patterns and habits start with early childhood experiences. And that is of concern, because think about when a child has a question, when a child wants to question, or a young adult wants to question why something is. In many cases, in our households, and I'm sure others too, but certainly in our households, we're told to be seen and not heard. Don't question me. Even if it is a valid question.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat. But so I encourage us as parents, as women, and as fathers, to allow at a very early age our children to have a voice. Allow them to question, encourage their curiosity, because that builds confidence. The ability to ask a question and know that you have the right for someone to respond and give you an answer, that starts very early. And so I think there are some things we can do to encourage and build confidence in our children, so that when Keisha is 19, 20, getting her first major job out of college, she's okay saying, hey, I've grown accustomed to asking questions and demanding an answer. I have the right to do that here. I think that's a part of it as well.
And can we not ignore the point that Keisha has graduated from college at 19 or 20? Can we not forget that?
Keisha's smart. Keisha's on it.
Yeah, Keisha's doing exceptionally well, because most of us in undergrad, it was 21.
Took some
22.
time.
Yeah, so Keisha did well. Jasmine, what about yourself? Have you always been comfortable discussing salary with your close friends, or are you?
I am, and I have been, because I'm an organizer now, and I work to make sure that so many of the issues that show up in our lives make their way to the ears of the lawmakers who need to hear about these stories. So I do believe policy can help us close gaps on the ground. But before I was an organizer, I was a teacher. And as an educator, you're thinking about not only your babies and how much you love them and how much you want to help and support them throughout the day, but you notice all these factors outside of your classroom impacting your classroom, right? And so I really appreciate our conversation about how so many of these systemic challenges, yes, we're talking about them here when it comes to wages and compensation, but they manifest themselves in so many places throughout our society. And I really think that education is one of them. And so, as teachers, we've got the pay scale, it's pretty transparent, but you do find those frustrations because you're looking at your pay scale compared to such and such county, and you're wondering what the difference is. And you start, learning and understanding a little bit more about these real structural challenges, even funding education still based on zip codes, right? So pay transparency is very important. And it was kind of built into some of my earlier work days as an educator. And even now it still is important to talk about, but can be taboo. So you really do need that village of women around you to make sure that they say, hey, have you heard about this? Did you know you might be entitled to that? Because, not only is the secrecy part of the problem, but I think exposure is part of the solution. And the more we're exposed to all the things that we are entitled to, whether they be in rights, codified in a policy, or in practices that show up in our culture, exposure, I think, is really important for all of us.
So, Avis, why do you suppose that it is so difficult historically for Black women to talk about how much money they make?
I think there is an issue of shame, perhaps, wrapped up in it. I do think that all of the observations brought up in this discussion are absolutely true in terms of, a cultural aspect that I just need to get in here and work. I need to get in, and when I prove myself, then I'll have these greater opportunities. And unfortunately, what we find is oftentimes we get in there and we work more and we prove ourselves over and over again, and we do the work for ourselves and for other people on our team, only to get leapfrogged by other people who we've been covering for potentially for years. And then they get stuck. And then it becomes an issue of what's wrong with me. So there is a lot, I think, that's entangled in that, that creates a situation where we blame ourselves for our own oppression. And we have to figure out that the fault is not an internal fault. The fault is an institutional fault. And there needs to, I agree, be some work around how can we make sure that our sisters are emboldened with the information that they need to go out there and advocate for themselves early and often throughout their careers. The point that you made previously, Harold, around parents saying just get that good job. Now we're seeing what's happening, for example, with all of these federal workers, and especially disproportionately Black women being unceremoniously, completely thrown out of their careers based on what seemed at the time to be a logical assumption that this is a good federal government job. It's a good government job, so you should just take it. And now we see with this new level of oppression and honestly, racism and sexism and all the isms that are endemic to this particular administration, how at the end of the day, women are having to figure out how can they start their lives over at a very unfortunate point in their lives where they never thought they would have to do that. And so it's really a moment in which we need to understand that we have a right to advocate for ourselves, that it is okay to ask for more, that what we do now is very critical. I know for me, now I have sons, okay? But I know when my oldest got his first job out of graduate school, we talked about his offer, okay? And we talked about all the different ways in which he could magnify his compensation, everything from his salary to the stock options to all the other things that he needs to be negotiating, time off and all of the things. And so we made sure that he ended up with a very, very powerful package. Like those are the types of things that I believe that our parents need to see as part of our responsibility and making sure that our children are launched correctly. And he ended up with his very first job out of graduate school, honestly, making about $75,000 more than I did in my last job when I was a nonprofit executive. And so I think it's very important for people to understand that we do have power when we choose to assert it. And though there is one opportunity that you might really, really want, you might not understand that unless you really go in there and advocate for yourself, you will never be able to recreate the power that you have in that dynamic where they have shown that they want you. You have more power. The power dynamic has shifted there. They do not want to start this process over again in terms of looking for someone else to offer it to. They have made the decision that it is you that they want. There will probably be no other moment in which your power will be that great and that opportunity to be able to set your own terms. And we have to be very aggressive about sharing that knowledge with our children and our peers so that they can have the best chance to start off right in each and every career opportunity that they have. And when situations shift and they need to change and go someplace else, understand that the game starts over. It's a reset button. You do not have to start your negotiation based on what you made in the last salary. And so all of these are important bits of nuggets that we need to know and we need to apply when we're looking to position ourselves better for compensation that we deserve throughout our careers.
So, and I think you make excellent points. I guess my question is more directed not so much at what they may do to us, or in the context of this conversation, what they may do to Black women, but what Black women need to do in educating within their circle. Because as we know, and you've all talked about this, is that, yeah, a lot of Black women will not talk about their salary even with their closest girlfriends. They'll talk about how much they paid for their bag. They'll talk about how much they paid for the new Lexus and what a great deal they got. But they're not going to tell you how much their new salary is for the new job. I will tell you, at least from this man's perspective, since I became a professional with my guys, whenever I got a new job, I was like, man, I'm going to Columbus, Ohio, and this is what they're going to pay me. Or I'm going to Buffalo, New York. This is how much more I'm going to make. No one had to ask. It was part of our conversation. Was it expected? No, but it was part of a practice that we did. I would argue that the Black women, y'all don't do that.
I'm going to respectfully push back.
Push on back.
Only because I believe that the framing of the question, while really important, what can Black women do, is one that puts all the responsibility on Black women. And
let me say this: I'm not saying that. Well, we are responsible. Number one, but number two, that is one of the many steps. So you know that this is an issue out there. Let's do what we need to do so that we are armed with all of the things that Avis was just saying. But please go right ahead, Jess.
Absolutely. I think arming ourselves with all that we can to know as much as we can is really important. I also think that for every thing that we can come up with that Black women should do, and there's a list, right? I also think there are structural and institutional policies and practices that really undergird the inequities. And I think that in addition to our individual responsibility, there is also a responsibility that our systems have and our institutions have. And when they fall short of those responsibilities, they should be held accountable. And that's some of the work that I really take pride in, is making sure that if you've got this policy, let's make sure it's implemented well. And if this policy is missing, let's make it happen. We are talking here about the pay wage gap, but Georgia is still one of 3 states in the entire country without even a sexual harassment or workplace protections law for women. And so I continue to overlay these issues to illustrate that this is all intertwined. And I think that when we ask, what can we do differently? We've got to ask that about Black women as individuals, and we're quite reflective, many of us, right? But we've also got to ask that same question of our institutions, of our systems, and of all of the jobs and employers that have a lot of control in this as well.
So, Venetia,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on this. There's room on both levels. I think I understand your question. Right. Yes, there are policies and systems that need to change. That's been the case since, they let us off the boat, right? And we're still here. So my feeling is, the question is, what is it that we can do tangibly right now, today, while we wait? Because we've been waiting, and, look at the administration we have. So yes, we need that. But what can we do right now to move the needle? And I think there are some very concrete things. I mean, all the way from, again, early childhood. I think as a mother, I'm also a mother of sons, Avis. I encourage my sons to have a voice. I have a number of girlfriends that as soon as their child says anything that is counter to what they have said, it gets shut down. Mm-hmm. That is a problem. I mean, I'm not here to talk about parenting, but that has a cumulative and compound effect over that child's life and carries into adulthood, where they don't have the confidence to speak up. And that's what we're really talking about here today. Most of my female friends and colleagues aren't the ones busting through the door saying, hey, Tim, John, listen, here's what it is. I did this, and this in the last year. We need to talk about where I'm going in this institution. And here's what I see. I'd like this in terms of salary. And it doesn't need to be an ultimatum. Negotiation is a skill, and you need reps for that, right? So we should be encouraging our young adults to have a voice and giving them the confidence and the space to do that in a safe space, so that when they get into an intimidating space, again, they've already had those reps. That's one. Two, anytime a young woman or older woman is changing careers, she should have a core of women that she trusts. I agree with you, Harold. We're quick to talk about what we bought and what we have, but we need to get comfortable in this space. I just took, I'll leave that on it. Anytime someone is considering,
no, please do share.
Anytime we're negotiating or up for a new position, we should have a tribe. We should have a tribe of women and men, okay, and men, that we can go and trust and say, hey, here's what they offered. What do you think about this? We have to have people. And then last, I think, as all the ladies on this call, we all are in positions of influence. We should be talking to young women about a wide cross section of career opportunities. Women, the research is very clear, particularly in K through 12, women are shepherded into very specific fields and industries. We're not encouraged as much, unless it's a special program, to go into STEM, to go into AI, to go into programming and engineering. We're not. Whereas the men are steered toward that. And that's where the money is. I'm a finance professor, so it's debits and credits, dollar. Look, the cost of living is rising, and there are very few industries that are rising at the same pace as inflation and the cost of living. And we are still being shepherded into those lower paying industries. That must change. And some of it, just lack of exposure. So here you have a Avis on the call, you have a Jasmine on the call, you have a Venetia on the call. We should be out there talking in schools, giving, once a month, once a quarter. We're all busy. I get it. Speaking to a young woman on the corner at our church or wherever it may be in the grocery. Hey, have you thought about this? This is an opportunity for you. We don't know. They don't know what they don't know. They only know what they've seen. And so I think those are some concrete things we can do today. It doesn't create an act of Congress that can move the needle for someone.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I even as a Black man, I remember something that happened to me. This was years and years ago, when I had come home to DC to interview for the same job that I was doing in Buffalo, New York, and the person who held the purse strings, who was a Black woman, said to me, well, how much did you make there?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it doesn't matter, because that's Buffalo. This is DC. I'm from here. I know how much it costs to live in DC. So what I made there has nothing to do with, and she bristled at that.
That's an anchoring technique.
Right, because she was trying to, well, we have to figure out how much, we're going to pay you. And my internal conversation was, are you kidding me? One has nothing to do with the other. I didn't get the job, but still, that is, one of the risks, but
you want to catch that up front, though, because anyone that's going to use that as a tactic, it doesn't start and end there, as you said. That's a tactic. If it's not that tactic, it'll be another tactic when it's time for promotion and raise. So it's better to catch that and get a no before a lot of time and energy have been expended.
Real quick, Avis, I'll let you have the last word, at least for Black women who are listening to this conversation and saying, yeah, but how do I start? Where do I look for information about who's getting paid what on my job?
Yeah, so there are several online websites that you can go to. I think Glassdoor, for example, is one of them, where you can look at a particular job title in a specific geographic area, and you can see what the typical salary range is for that specific thing. And I think that's a good place to start. But I'm also familiar with 9 to 5. I think 9 to 5 is an amazing organization. Check out their work and their research to get some guidance and to get some tips around how you can maximize your power at work. The bottom line is to recognize that you do have power and to not acquiesce it once the job offer is made. You have power, push through.
Real quick, Jasmine, do you have a website you can share with us real quick? I'll post it on our website this evening.
Yes, many thank you, Avis and Venetia, for sharing your brilliance, and Harold for having us. And you can reach out and look up more about 9 to 5 at 9to5.org. 9 to 5, the numbers, 9to5.org. And part of our mission is to make sure that we help educate each other, and then beyond the information, helping activate you and remind you of your power so that we can continue to make some of these enduring changes.
You mentioned Glassdoor, Avis. Maybe the next resource for Black women should be called Glass Ceiling, and I'll leave it at that. I'm always good with a nugget. Always good with a nugget. Ladies, thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time. We could talk about this forever, but I am out of time. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, July 10th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.